Well, good afternoon, brothers and sisters. Welcome to Readings with Regina. And you know, I am Regina. I would like to give a big shout out to all of my subscribers. You are the reason that I am here, and I am so very appreciative of you. And I'd like to remind you guys and gals, go to my website. Check out my books. You want to be helpful to me? Buy one of my books. That would be great. This is a monster. Panther Poems, Poetry of a Sister Panther. Check it out. I also have this monster as well. Blacks in Race Defense, Killers and Cutthroats. And what I've done in this marvelous book is to gather together various African American personalities, and I give you their whole life. And check this out, I do it in poetry. So, all of you poets out there, get with these books. Now, let me even say this to you about my books. I don't just want you to buy them, I really want you to purchase the book. They're relatively cheap, and then write a review after you've read the book. And my books are poetry, so it's not going to take you that long to read, but it is very important that you write a review for me on Amazon, because then Amazon will place my works more prominently so that people can know that Regina Jennings is here and she has written poetry for her people. Nobody else but her people. Now, if other people want to buy my work, do that, of course. But these books, all of my books, because I've written a couple more, I wrote them for Black people. I wrote them so that you could really know your history in the way that I see it, so that nothing is left out of our history the way that it normally is. All right, I'm going to get right down with it today. This episode is called The N-Word. You know what that N-word is. The N-word dogs return. Oh, yes, they do. Outsmarting N-word dogs. There were Black people that outsmarted them. And pedophilia during slavery. Lord have mercy. And of course, I am still starting off with the book, The Half Has Never Been Told, Slavery and the Making of American Capitalism, because let me remind you, you are the reason that this economical system, you are one of the main reasons that this economical system under which we live continues in America. So I want you to be thinking about that, because I really want you to be thinking about hello forever and ever and ever. It makes me so pleased when you show through. Absolutely. So I want all of you within the sound of my voice to understand that you are a very important reason as to why we even have an America today. So I'm going to start with the half. And I'm going to remind you, because I'm skipping around in this book. Okay. So I'm going to remind you, though, we are dealing with America becoming America. All of the states are not in place. The French are here. The Germans are here. The Spanish are here. And they are all vying for American territory. And they are all genociding the red nations that were here when they came. Okay, so that's important for you to know. All right. Rival empire Spain still hoped to block the growth of the United States. So did Britain, and 50,000 Native Americans who did not plan to surrender the rich soil under their feet still lived on the millions of acres that Yazoo companies, these are companies, land speculation companies in the Mississippi Valley, Yazoo companies and other speculators had successfully turned into paper on the financial exchanges of America's northeastern cities. These conflicts were coming, and soon. Even sooner, in 1811, the enslaved people who had been brought in such diversity to the Mississippi Valley as, quote, heads, end of quote, and slaves, quote, of the acts, end of quote, would make their own attempt to change the course of things. along the river's east bank above New Orleans on the German coast. Check this out. What? German coast? Now, if it's called the German coast, what does that tell you about the people who were there? They were Germans. Germans also fighting the Native Americans. Dozens of slave labor camps stretched back from the river in French surveyed long lots, narrow strips of land that ran a mile or two across cleared ground to a dense belt of forested swamps. Their pattern, still visible from the air today, gave the maximum number of large landowners access to the Mississippi, each holding had a slice of the incredibly rich soil that lay between the levee and the swamps. The swamps themselves were almost impassable, full of alligators, snakes, panthers, and bears. Runaways, those are your ancestors, runaways sought refuge in the swamps, hiding from overseers and free Black slave catches. Can you dig it? Breaks my heart, but that's what's up. 40-year-old Philip, also known as Coles, ran away from Kenner and Henderson's new place, John Palfrey's old Canes Brûlée. See, these are French words. In early November 1810, as the sugar harvests intense labor began, he'd been brought down the river on a flatboat from Natchez and sold to Kenner and Henderson just that year. A few miles closer to the city was a huge labor camp that still survives as the Show Plantation Ormond. Pennsylvanian Richard Butler and his business partner Samuel McCutcheon had recently brought dozens of new enslaved people for Ormond, one of whom was a 6-foot-tall John. He, too, had run to the woods in November, and he had not returned. And somewhere back there, as 1811 dawned, John Palfrey's runaway, his name was Cracker, still lurked. The sugar harvest ended at the beginning of January. For weeks, overseers and owners had pushed the enslaved drivers, who in turn had pushed the cane cutters, the loaders, and the women who fed the mill with cane in double shifts all day and night. The sugar makers, the artisans, free or slave, who supervised the artful process of boiling, skimming, and crystallizing cane juice into sugar, had also driven their subordinates around the clock. Now, some of the enslaved spent their days loading hogsheads of sugar and molasses onto flatboats and pirogues for transport to New Orleans. New Orleans keeps coming up. Most of the thousands brought in the previous 10 years from Africa and the Caribbean, local-born Louisianans, and a few from Virginia and Maryland as well, labored at dreary January tasks such as digging up minefields of sharp-cut sugarcane stubble so the next crop of cane could be planted. Now listen very carefully to what I'm about to read. Had you been out walking near midnight on Saturday, January 5th, 1811, you would have heard from the riverside of the levee that protected Manuel Andre's land from spring floods, the murmuring of men's voices in mixed Creole French and broken English. These men were not just sitting around trading stinging pulls from a jug of tafia, that's the harsh raw rum made from cane juice, nor were they simply alternating complaints about women with ragged growls about the overseers or the slave owner. The men were planning what would become the biggest slave rebellion in the United States before the Civil War. Now check that out. I got a picture here to show you. These brothers got together, French, Creole, because you understand that when the French were here, they were raping black women. Now, if you look up Creole in your search engine, it's going to say the intermarriage between the French and African American. Well, no intermarriage. Now, maybe there were some cases, but very few. Women were raped, and that would then produce a certain kind of biracial person that indeed would speak a form of English, how can I say, joined into French, which is called Creole. So these brothers, they were indeed talking because they were planning. All right, people? Okay, let me just move this from here. Now, for the next book, Blake, or The Huts of America by Martin Delaney. If you remember from the last reading that I did of this book, the patrollers or patrollers, those are the origins of the police in America, the patrollers, they went into the Negro quarters for a frolic. And they were uninvited, but they went into the cabin of Uncle Judy, Aunt Judy, no, wait a minute, Uncle Jerry and Aunt Rachel. These were two enslaved older people. And they had made a little dinner for our friend Blake, the revolutionary. Well, when the patrollers came, they uninvitedly sat down and ate the food. So I'm going to pick it up from there. Okay. Rising from the homely meal at the humble board of Aunt Rachel and Uncle Jerry, they emptied their pockets, that's the patrollers, of crackers, cold biscuits, and cheese, giving the old man a plug of honey-cured tobacco to be divided between himself and his wife, in lieu of what they had, without invitation, that's very important, taken the liberty of eating. They ate the people's food. The patrol this evening were composed of the better class of persons, principally businessmen, two of whom being lawyers who went out that evening for a mere, quote, frolic among the Negroes, a frolic among the Negroes. Because you have to understand that the enslavers noticed the differences in culture among their enslaved people, and they would come down to the slave quarters to be entertained. You know, they could sing with them, dance with them, eat their food without being invited. That was America during the 19th century. Okay. Receiving the parting hand accompanied with a goodbye, honey, and God bless you, my son. They talking about Henry, not the patrollers. They've left. From the old people, Henry left the hut to continue his course through the forest. Hearing persons approaching, he stepped aside from the road to conceal himself. When two parties at the junction of two roads met each other coming to a stand. What's up tonight, Colonel? Inquired one. Nothing but the raffle. Are you going? Yes, the whole party here. Won't you go? I don't know. What's the chances? $5 only. $5 a chance? What the deuce is the prize? Oh, there's several for the same money. What are they? Now remember now, Blake or Henry is hiding in the woods, but he could hear these men talking. That fine horse and buggy of Colonel Sprout, a mare and colt. Listen to what I say next very carefully. A little Negro girl, a little Negro girl, a little Negro girl, 10 years of age, and a trail of 4 of the finest Negro dogs in the state. Hello, all them? How many chances in the name of graciousness are there? Only 150. $750 for the whole lot? That's cheap. But then all can't win, and it must be a loss to somebody. Will you go, Captain? Well, I don't care. Go it is. When the party started in the direction of the sport, Henry following to reconnoiter them. On approaching the tavern, the rafflers who waited the rest of the company to gather could be seen and heard through the uncurtained windows in the door, which was frequently opened, standing around a blazing hot fire, and in groups over the barroom floor, amusing themselves with jests and laughter. Henry stood in the verge of the forest in a position to view the whole of their proceedings. Presently, there was a rush out of doors with glee and merriment. Old Colonel Sprout was bringing out his dogs to test their quality previous to the raffle. Now, gentlemen, exclaimed he, them is the best trained dogs in this part of the state. Bedad, they's the best dogs in this country. When you say nigger, you needn't fear. They'll ever go after anything but a nigger. All right. So, yes, we have the Negro dogs. I'm being nice because the people actually call them nigger dogs. But when they were advertised, they were called Negro dogs. And if you look at the bottom here, you see this is 1856. And let's read this advertisement again. Negro dogs and will attend at any reasonable distance to the catching of runaways. And what is Henry? Henry's a runaway. Runaways at the lowest possible rates. All those having slaves in the woods. Where's Henry? He's in the woods. Will do well to address. And so you can see this is an actual advertisement of Negro dogs. Let me show you this. Now, in this picture, you can see that the Negro dogs, they had a few problems going on. Because Brother Love here, he got an axe, So it's a fight going on here. But what I wanted you all to see is the fact that they had these trained killer, torturer dogs, okay, that they would use to go after runaways. You understand? Because to run away, imagine this, during bondage, it was illegal. Because slavery was legal. Understand that, people? So they had all kind of machinations going on. All kinds of awful features going on during slavery. But before I go to our brother Fred Douglass, his book was written in 1845. I want to remind you once again, before I go there, that at this raffle in that tavern, they were raffling off a fine carriage, horse and buggy. But they were also raffling off a 10-year-old Negro girl. Let me see if I can find another little picture I found. I don't think I can find it. I wanted you to see a 10-year-old little enslaved girl, but if I can bring it up a little later, I will. Now, before I go there, though, Lord have mercy. What are those men going to do with a 10-year-old Negro girl? I'm not going to spell it out to you. I want you to just use your imagination. Why would they be raffling off a baby girl? By the way, that 10-year-old girl, she's our ancestor. You understand? And whoever purchased her or won her, okay? She was at their mercy. I'll go no further. You have a mind. Use it. All right, now I'm going to go to Brother Fred Douglass, the narrative of Frederick Douglass. Let me change this banner, though. I want to have something that I feel about you, my beautiful subscribers. And keep thinking that you are wonderful because you are. You wouldn't have made it to Earth if you weren't. All right, here's Fred Douglass. I have now reached a period in my life when I can give dates. I left Baltimore and went to live with Master Thomas Auld at St. Michael's in March 1832. It was now more than 7 years since I lived with him in the family of my old master on Colonel Lloyd's plantation. We, of course, were now almost entire strangers to each other. He was to me a new master, and I to him a new slave. I was ignorant of his temper and disposition. He was equally so of mine. A very short time, however, brought us into full acquaintance with each other. I was made acquainted with his wife, not less than with himself. They were well matched, being equally mean and cruel. I was now, for the first time during a space of more than 7 years, made to feel the painful gnawings of hunger, something which I had not experienced before since I left Colonel Lloyd's plantation. It went hard enough with me then, when I could look back to no period at which I had enjoyed a sufficiency. It was tenfold harder after living in Master Hugh's family, where I had always had enough to eat, and of that which was good. I have said Master Thomas was a mean man. He was so. Not to give a slave enough to eat is regarded as the most aggravated development of meanness, even among slave holders. The rule is, no matter how coarse the food, only let them have enough of it. This is the theory, and in the part of Maryland from which I came, it is the general practice, though there are many exceptions. Master Thomas gave us enough of neither coarse nor fine food. There were 4 slaves of us in the kitchen. Listen to this, people. My sister Eliza, my aunt Priscilla, Henny, and myself. So you see, they kept slaves often within the family. You dig? And when one person in the family died, well, they'd ship the slaves on to another person. So Fred and his family are in the kitchen. Okay. All right. And we were allowed less than a half of a bushel of cornmeal per week. Cornmeal. Now, all of you out there that might use cornmeal, you can fry your fish in it, dip it in cornmeal. Boom. Every time you use your cornmeal, I want you to think about Fred and his family members getting cornmeal to eat each week. Okay, and very little else, either in the shape of meat or vegetables. It was not hard enough for us to subsist on. It was not enough for us to subsist upon. We were therefore reduced to the wretched necessity of living at the expense of our neighbors. This we did by begging and stealing. You see, look at this. Begging and stealing, whichever came handy in the time of need, the one being considered as legitimate as the other. A great many times have we poor creatures been nearly perishing with hunger, when food in abundance lay moldering in the safe and smokehouse, and our pious mistress was aware of the fact, and yet that mistress and her husband would kneel every morning and pray that God would bless them in basket and store. Now, Fred absolutely points out these are good Christian people. They pray all the time. Oh, yeah. God is on their side. Yet they treat their enslaved people. They're enslaved people that work for them for free. They treat them horribly. So Fred Douglass points that out because he wants you to understand the hypocrisy in slavery. All right, here we go. Our last book, of course, is the narrative of William Wells Brown, also an enslaved child, like Fred Douglass was. And this book was written in 1853. Very good. Here we go. After the woman's child had been given away, remember, on the coffle, first of all, let me show you a coffle. On the coffle, see, they would walk Negroes across the Americas from one plantation to another or from one owner to another. And the men were chained. Okay, you can see they're chained behind their back. And these are the women in the back. Okay, and you can see the white men on horses. There's one, there's two, and there's three. They're on horses. But the black people, the enslaved people going up for sale, they had to walk. So in my previous episode last week, I told you that one of the babies of the mothers kept crying. So the Negro trader took that baby and just gave it away. All right, so here we go. After the woman's child had been given away, Mr. Walker rudely commanded her to retire into the ranks with the other slaves. Women who had children were not chained, but those who had none were. As soon as her child was taken, she was chained to the gang. Sometime after this, Walker bought a woman who had a blind child. You know, like blind, like Stevie Wonder, like Ray Charles. It being considered worthless. Now, just think of Stevie Wonder's song. This is awful. But the blind child, a blind black enslaved child, was considered worthless. It was given to the trader by the former owner of the woman on the score of humanity. He's saying that he wished to keep mother and child together. Now he's selling them, the former owner, but he wants to keep them together. At first, Walker declined taking the child, saying that it would be too much trouble. But the mother, wishing to have her boy with her, begged him to take it, promising to carry it the whole distance in her arms. Consequently, he took the child, and the gang started on their route to the nearest steamboat landing, which was above 100 miles. These people walked 100 miles. Can you dig that? Okay. Let me see to have, okay. I kind of lost my place. The former slave woman on the score. Okay. Okay. Consequently, he took the child, and the gang started on their route to the nearest steamboat landing, which was above 100 miles. As might have been expected, the woman was unable to carry the boy and keep up with the rest of the gang. See, you're on a coffle. You got to keep up. Okay, you can't slow down the coffle. Oh, Lord. The woman was unable to carry the boy and keep up with the rest of the gang. They put up at night at a small town, and the next morning, when about to start, Walker took the little boy from its mother and sold it to the innkeeper for the small sum of $1. The poor woman was so frantic at the idea of being separated from her only child that it seemed impossible to get her to leave it. Not until the chains were put upon her limbs and she fastened to the other slaves could they get her to leave the spot. My Lord, my Lord. By main force, this slave mother was compelled to go on and leave her child behind. Some days after, a lady from one of the free states, see, some states had slavery, other states did not. And that was a big question in Congress because, all of the slave states had slavery. Some in the North didn't, okay, but all the Southerners did. Anyway, Some days after, a lady from one of the free states was traveling the same road and put up at the same inn. She saw the child the morning after her arrival and heard its history from one of the slaves, which was confirmed by the innkeeper's wife. A few days after, the following poem appeared in one of the newspapers from the pen of the lady who had seen the blind child. I'm going to read that poem. It's a beautiful poem. I'm going to read that poem when I meet with you all again this coming Thursday. Same time, same place. But what I want to end with today, I really want you to understand the absolute barbarity of slavery. And I also want you to understand that indeed, yeah, Jammy Jam, yeah, Jammy, yeah, Jammy Mills, I got you. You right. I mean, it's like, how could you do this? How could, but you know what? Really, people, what I really want you to understand is too, this was legal. This was legal. And I really want you to understand that within the context of us being on earth today. I don't want any of you within the sound of my voice to act like you can't be a spark for change when change needs to be. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more on Thursday, okay? Because there were people fighting against this institution. It's just that the money people had the most power. I'm sure you've heard that before. However, that's not how I want you to think when we part today. I want you to understand this barbarity, this demonism, this hypocrisy was America, our America, during the 17th, 18th, and I'm reading now the 19th century. Okay? Well, as always, my beloved people, oh, do I appreciate you. Thank you for being here. I will be back with you on Thursday, same time, 2 o'clock, 2 p.m., same place. And in the meantime, know that you are loved and know that I pray for you every morning and every night before I close my eyes. Thank you, my people. Take good care.